My breaking and entering turned into something horrifying. I had kept my eyes on this neighbourhood for a while now, trying to spot someone leaving home. I was in the business of breaking and entering, which, as you can imagine, hasn't been the most profitable business during these trying times. I'm sure you think less of me for my less than honest profession. I don't mind. I know I'm not making the world a better place, but since childhood, after getting together with the wrong crowd, it has been the only thing I've ever been good at. Please don't judge me too hard. I know I deserve to be judged, but I do follow some homemade ethics. I'm always unarmed, for example, and I never take more than I think anyone can survive losing. I had my eyes on a large villa at the end of the cul-de-sac. No one had come or gone for the entire time I'd been scouting this area. Sitting in my old van with a cigarette between my dry lips. It might sound boring to you, but I always find it peaceful sitting in my car, watching people go about their lives, completely unaware of my shadowy existence. I was pretty sure no one was home, but to be as sure as possible and to assess if there was anything valuable inside, I had sneaked up to the house at night and looked inside. Although I hadn't been able to see that much, it was clear no one was home and it was filled with a lot of old stuff. I was afraid it would just be some hoarder's junk, but by the look of what I saw, it seemed to be the expensive kind of old stuff. It got me excited. Most likely, I thought, the house belonged to someone who had been moved to an old people's home. The next day, I did my usual routine. I parked my van nearby, dressed up as a mover, grabbed my tools and casually began working with the lock. Entering from the front, I noticed the name on the mailbox. Franz Oscar. European, perhaps? Perhaps he had been stranded overseas after the travel ban. It didn't matter. The less I knew about the victim, the better. It was an easy lock. Only took me 3 minutes. My heart began to beat more rapidly as I stepped inside. There was always some adrenaline involved, but this time, for some reason, I felt nervous. It smelled mouldy, rotten almost. Maybe the poor bastard had died without anyone noticing. No, there weren't any clothes in the hallway, just empty hangers. It was dark. I tried to turn on the light, but there wasn't any electricity. I lit the flashlight I had brought with me and began exploring. There were books everywhere, not just in the many bookshelves, but on the floor and on the other furniture as well. All of them looked equally old with their leather binding. Perhaps they were worth something, I thought, but probably not given that they hadn't been taken care of properly. The antique Chinese vases in the living room, though, were most likely expensive. The old oil paintings too, perhaps. All of the shelves in the living room had objects from different ancient cultures on them. This guy was a collector of rare items, I thought, some of which might even be illegal to own. For a second, I almost felt like Indiana Jones. This belongs in a museum. The thought made me smile, but the smile was very short-lived. There was a thud coming from upstairs. I froze in my tracks. My gut told me to escape, but I chose to listen to reason instead. Anything could have made that sound, most likely a rat. Still, I wanted to be sure. I remained silent and listened carefully. It was difficult to hear, but there was definitely something moving around on the second floor. It didn't sound like a person though. There was only this faint scraping sound. I decided to sneak up the stairs so that I could make sure there was nothing to worry about. Worst case scenario, I thought there would just be some elderly person there. In that case, I would just bolt for the door and drive away. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw that the lights were on in one of the rooms. The door was ajar. A small corridor lay between me and the room. Too risky, I decided, and was just about to leave when I heard a faint voice coming from the room. It sounded like it belonged to an old woman. "Help me, please." What the fuck? Of all things, I wasn't expecting this. "Don't leave me. Please, come and help me." She must have heard me somehow, I tried to think. A part of me wanted to get the hell out of here and call an ambulance anonymously, but another part of me wanted to help and not be a coward. It was possible the old lady had fallen and didn't have time to wait for an ambulance. It would be awkward though, since it was pretty obvious what I was doing in her home. "Help me," the woman continued. Slowly, I walked towards the door. The closer I got, the worse the smell got. It was utterly disgusting. A mixture of excrement and rotten fish. I covered my mouth and nose with my shirt, but it didn't help much. My gag reflexes kicked in a few times, but I prevented myself from throwing up. It wasn't just the smell that got progressively worse. My nervous feeling from before also increased, the closer I got to the door. My gut feeling was telling me, screaming at me, to get the fuck out of the house. I wasn't going to listen to it though. I always used to say that our gut feelings were what made us believe the earth was flat. I'm not saying that anymore. When I pushed the door open, I was met with a small study room. All the walls were covered in shelves filled with old books. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, lit by candlelight, and right below it, on the floor, was a large metal cage with black bars. I gulped out of fear as soon as I locked eyes with the old lady inside the cage. She was obviously the victim of someone truly disturbed. She was sitting down, completely naked. Her old fat body had a grey shade to it, and her long, thin hair was pitch black. She looked both terrifying and revolting, as you can probably imagine. But the thing that made me the most uncomfortable was the fact that one of her arms was twice as long as the other arm. This asymmetry, which I couldn't explain, seemed unnatural somehow. "Well, don't just stand there," she whispered. "Help me before he comes back." "Oh my God," I yelled. There was a body in the corner of the room. It looked like it had belonged to a teenage girl, given the clothes, but it was difficult to say because her head was missing. "You're good with locks, aren't you?" the old woman said. "That's why you're here, right?" "I'm calling the police," I said out of reflex. "The person who did this," I said with a shaky voice. "What the fuck happened here anyway? Get this cage open, please." I looked at the lock on the cage. It would be easy to pick, I realised, but the question if I should wasn't as easy to answer. The old woman reached for me with her long arm. "He'll be back any moment now," she said. "Okay," I said. I didn't want my prejudice to get in the way. This woman needed my help, no matter how she looked, and there seemed to be little time. "I will pick the lock, and then I'm going to call the police." "Yes," she said as she licked her dry lips excitedly. "You're good with locks. That's why you came, wasn't it?" I was still holding my tool bag. The stench was not even describable, but the shock from seeing all this made me completely forget about it. I sat down next to the lock. There were book pages everywhere around the cage, a lot of them covered in blood. I saw the title of the book at the top of one of the pages, Franz Oscar's Diary, volume number 5. "What happened here?" I said as I picked the lock. "You smell good," the woman said. "Okay." I didn't know how to respond to that. "But who's that girl? The guy killed her." Click. The cage was unlocked. I stepped back as the old woman pushed it open. "No," the woman said as she crawled out of the cage using her long arm. "I killed her." You killed?" I stopped talking. As the old woman stood up, she towered above me. She was taller than any person I'd ever seen. She extended her long arm towards me. "I made her head explode," she said and giggled. I turned around and tried to run out of the room, but the door shut itself with a big bang. "He kept me here for so long," the old woman said behind me. "I didn't get anything to eat. I'm very hungry now." She looked down on me, licking her lips just as excitedly as before. I tried to open the door, but to no avail. What a way to go for an expert in opening doors, I thought. There was nowhere to run. I moved to one of the corners of the room. The old woman leaped forward, but I quickly ran to the opposite side of the room. "What are you doing?" I yelled. She walked towards me. "Don't fight it," she said. "I've been waiting so long for you." "Let me out of here, you old hag," I yelled. "You want me to eat you," she said, "don't you?" "No, fuck off." As if I'd hurt her feelings, she began to wail like a child. The tears running down her saggy cheeks were made of blood. She sped up, bawling her eyes out, and grabbed me with her unnaturally long arm. I fought back, but she was unbelievably strong. It felt like I'd gotten stuck in a wrench. I fell down on the floor. just next to the dead girl, and wrestled the old woman as she tried to lay herself on top of me and stick her teeth into my flesh. I grabbed for anything and finally got a hold of one of the bookshelves. The old woman was just about to take a bite out of my throat when I succeeded in tipping the bookshelf right on top of her. Sunlight. There had been a window behind the bookshelf. The old woman let go of me for a moment because of the impact. I only had seconds. There was only one thing to do and I had no time to think it over. I got up and threw myself out of the window. Luckily, I landed in the bushes and didn't hurt myself too much. I ran to my van. I could hear the old woman screaming from the room upstairs. It gave me a strange, intense headache. I pressed my foot on the gas and drove away. Further down the street, two people, an old man and a young boy, ran towards the house. I never learned who they were or what had been going on in that house, and I hope I never will. Intruder break-in with my cousin. This happened to me when I was 14, or rather should I say this happened to us. If you were to ask how many times my cousin's parents bounced from house to house, he would just shrug his shoulders. That's how often his parents would move. Sometimes it would be houses, sometimes even apartments. I do miss the times when he did live in apartments, as whenever we would play hide and seek with our closest cousin, it would definitely be more exciting than just playing with some random kids from the apartment complex. Anyway, that's not important to the story. His parents were always a little weird, always constantly moving and leaving for business trips. That's how they could afford to move from place to place. And if you were to ask me what his parents did for a living, I literally have no idea. That's because I barely talked to them. And if I ever did, it was at parties they threw. But you know how that goes. The only thing I know is that his dad is a contractor. That's literally about all. I remember this day like the back of my hand. It was hot as hell. That day almost like 100 degrees. It felt more like 110. But it wasn't nothing too bad. I used to always have sleepovers at his house, whenever I could get the chance. This day was no different, or so I thought. I arrived at his house in the early hours of the afternoon, and as expected, his parents were away on a business trip. We opened some of the windows so we could let the hot air out. Granted, this probably didn't help our case at all, and most likely made it worse. We turned on each fan to max blast, and went upstairs to play video games on his Xbox. We played for about an hour or two and eventually we both got hungry. We agreed to go to this spot that was a 10-minute drive from his house. We got dressed and before we left we closed some of the windows. That way if anyone were to drive or walk by, they wouldn't just hop through the window. The irony while writing this still hits me like a brick, till this day. We got in my car and drove to the spot we agreed to get food at. I say my car because my mother trusted me enough to let me drive one of her spare cars. As bad as that sounds, she just trusted me enough on the road by myself. She knows I would never jeopardise my life or even remotely drive recklessly. We ordered our food and quickly headed back home to avoid traffic. When we got home, we sat in the living room and watched YouTube or whatnot while we ate our food. We sat there for about a good hour or two before we headed back upstairs to his room. At around 7 or 8, we closed each window as it was getting dark out. I'll cut out the small details as you can use your imagination what teenagers our age would do. I got thirsty and decided to go downstairs to get myself a cup of water before I decided to go to bed. It was around 10 at this point and I was getting tired, so quickly I filled up my cup and headed back downstairs. My cousin was already in bed, scrolling through social media. Shortly after, he rolled on his side and fell asleep. I couldn't fall asleep because of how incredibly hot it was, but after 10 minutes of rolling around and flipping the pillow around, eventually I fall asleep too. I woke up sometime later, I checked my phone, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure what woke me up, but something woke me up. I rubbed my eyes and took a sip of water. Now that I was awake and aware, I heard it. There was footsteps moving around downstairs. At first, I chalked up his parents coming back early from the business trip. But the footsteps kept pacing between one place. I heard drawers being opened and rummaged with. Footsteps were going between the living room and guest bedroom downstairs. I walked over to my cousin and shook him awake. He said, "What?" I asked him, "Are your parents supposed to be home?" His head snapped to look at me and said, "No, they're not supposed to be back until Tuesday." This made my heart skip a beat. I quickly tiptoed to the door and locked it. Just as I was about to walk away from the door, I heard it. Footsteps coming slowly up the stairs as if they were trying to be quiet. I know my cousin heard it too, because as soon as I turned my head to look in his direction, he was already quietly running to the window to unlock it. We were trying to lift it up, but the piece of shit was so old it wouldn't budge. We were grunting as quietly as we could, but it wasn't quite enough. We heard the doorknob try to be turned, but obviously it was locked. I think this angered the person on the other side. When he saw the door didn't budge, he started kicking and ramming into it. Now the clock was ticking. Adrenaline kicked in and we finally got the window to open. I yelled at my cousin, "Anthony, go!" and he leaped down onto the grass. Now it was my turn. I peeked my head over the edge and saw the fall. It had to be about 10 to 20 feet. Suddenly I heard the door being busted open. I didn't think twice and I just threw myself out the window. I landed on my right arm and backside. I looked up and saw a man with long messy hair. His eyes were opened so wide and he was looking right at me. I quickly got up and we bolted to the neighbour's house where we used their phone to call 911. Police showed up literally minutes later and investigated the house. They searched every single room and every single hiding space there could be, but he was nowhere to be found. He was already long gone. I found out from paramedics I had sprained my collarbone and bicep. Luckily nothing too serious. After that, the police took information regarding what happened and took a description of him. They said they would contact us if anything ever came up, but we never got a call back. I didn't tell my mum about the incident in fear of never getting sleep over at his house ever again, and told her that I fell from a very high rock and landed on my side. She took me to a doctor because I complained about pain in my shoulder. That's how I found out. Me and my cousin both assumed that when we left to go get food or whenever we went upstairs and before we closed the windows, the man simply just climbed through and hid in the basement, waiting until we fell asleep to rob us, or maybe even worse. We rarely even talk anymore, but whenever we bring it up, we both laugh at it. I don't think the man was ever caught. I just hope he doesn't do anything bad to anyone else like he could have done to us.